Hi, very good morning. I'm Dr. Janak Patel. So today I'm starting with one of the very common disorders which you see in your everyday practice. I'm not an endocrinologist. I'm a general physician, but I'll try to make this topic as interesting as possible and as simple as possible. We call as diabetes mellitus. So we'll be talking on a topic we call diabetes mellitus. In today's topic, I'll be talking what is diabetes, we call as an introduction. What is diabetes? What are the different types of diabetes? What are the common symptoms? How you suspect and how you investigate them, and then how you put them into a group by which you can decide regarding the treatment part of it. So we'll be talking on those what we call as the introduction to diabetes. This will be one part. In second part, I'll be discussing on oral hypoglycemic agents, that is treatment of diabetes, and in part 3 I'll be talking on insulin, which is the injectable form for treatment of diabetes. So whatever we are going to discuss, I'll try to make it as simple as possible so that you can understand very nicely. So we'll be talking on what we call as introduction, different types, classification, different terminology, what you use in diabetes mellitus, then how you suspect and how you investigate. So if I make this topic very simple, you will understand very nicely. If you understand, you will remember. If you remember, you will try to recognize. Because good number of time, diabetes is underdiagnosed, undertreated. So we should recognize them early, and if you treat them as early as possible, if you recognize them as early as possible, you can prevent microvascular and macrovascular complications. So again, my speech may not be like these two famous people, but I'll still try to make it as simple as possible and I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. But it will not be containing irrelevant talks. It will be on effects, what we call as evidence-based medicine. Now, diabetes is like iceberg. If you see, a ship does not know how deep the iceberg is, and usually it meets with an accident. So diabetes is also considered as an epidemic. Now at present we are facing one of the most common epidemic, that is we call as a COVID-19. But diabetes is more dangerous than COVID because it kills lot many number of person because of complications of diabetes. So it is like an iceberg. There is a small tip on the surface, but deep inside we don't know how much it is. So what lies beneath? It is very difficult to identify. In stage 1, if you detect them early, in stage 1, that is you suspect the person who are likely to become diabetic, we call normal GTT, they are having absolutely normal reports, but detect them in that particular stage. In stage 2, you start getting impaired glucose tolerance or impaired fasting glucose, and this we label them as a pre-diabetic. While by and large almost majority of the people are detected in stage 3, or we call they are full blown type 2 diabetes mellitus. By that time you detect them at this particular stage, because stage 2 is pre-diabetic. If you detect them before even a pre-diabetic as early as possible, you can prevent even a pre-diabetic stage. So once the person is type 2, very frequently they are obese, they are hypertensive, they are type 2 diabetes, they are dyslipidemics. and we call them as cardiometabolic syndrome or syndrome X, or we call metabolic syndrome. And we are becoming capital for metabolic syndrome. India is becoming capital for metabolic syndrome. Or person may directly come to you with complication like diabetic nephropathy, ischemic heart disease, cerebrovascular strokes, hypertension, etc. Or diabetic retinopathy, diabetic neuropathy. By that time, already you got a macrovascular changes and microvascular changes. Because microvascular changes occurs early, macrovascular changes occurs late. So by the time you detect type 2 diabetes in stage 3, they are already having retinopathy and neuropathy, plus sometimes even they have got a nephropathy. So as early as possible, if you detect, you can prevent damage to this some of the organs, and invariably they succumb to death because of cardiovascular complications, most common complications. Now if you see roughly here, in 2013, the world, in entire world, approximately 382 millions diabetic were there, and they estimated that if at present whatever is the rate of detection of diabetes is there, by the 235 2035 2035, it will become 592 millions, or even it may be more than this, approximately 55% increase in the population. So there is a huge burden. So if you detect them early, you can help them out to prevent a secondary complication because of diabetes. Now if you compare the top 3 countries which are diabetic, in 1995, this was the estimated population in millions. In India, in China, in USA, almost roughly you see that they are very close by. But by 2025, you can see the difference. India will be on the peak. So at present we say that India is becoming a capital for diabetes, capital for hypertension, capital for cardiometabolic syndrome, and probably even for CKD. So we are going to be a capital for that. And for that purpose, we always say Mera Bharat Mahan. So we are capital for diabetes. We are also becoming a capital for hypertension and also for cardiometabolic syndromes and CKD. Now there is something called as a rule of half, which is there in India. Roughly if we say that if there are 700, or we call 7 million or 700 lakhs of population which are diabetic, but out of this very few people are detected and diagnosed as diabetes, almost we say 50%. So 350 lakhs, we'll just use the term 700, 350 are detected to have a diabetic, out of which only 175, that is 50%, receives care, and out of this achieves a target code is this. So they get the treatment. Now to achieve a target, it is only in 43. Roughly if you see this particular, it comes down tremendously low. So out of 700 diabetic, only 43, or we can say 44, gets desired outcome. Rest of the people, they are very poorly treated, and they invariably develop complications, macrovascular and microvascular complications. So that this figure should improve. There is one another thing which is very commonly along with diabetes we call as obesity. So as the human being has evolved, now this is what has happened. Because of increased calorie intake, the person has become obese, and because of a lack of exercise. So there is approximately, we say that 1 kg weight gain will increase cardiovascular risk, CVD risk, by 3.1%, and person to develop a diabetes, it will increase the diabetic risk by 4.5 to 9%. So just increase in 1 kg body weight more than expected weight, the person is likely to have an increased cardiovascular risk and increased diabetic complications. And so it is combined together called as a diabeticity, or we usually use the word cardiometabolic syndrome. Diabetes plus obesity makes you what we call as metabolic syndrome or syndrome X, or we also call as a cardiometabolic syndrome because there is very commonly involvement. So these are called deadly duo. So when the two things are together, it is a deadly duo. So a hypertensive person is twice as common in diabetic. So in a person who is suffering from diabetes, hypertension is twice common. A new onset of diabetes is 2.5 times more common in hypertension. 20 to 40% of IGT patient, means pre-diabetic, will have hypertension, and 40 to 50% of type 2 diabetes will have hypertension. Only 1/4 of hypertension in diabetes is controlled. So if you just take this figure, because diabetes is not well controlled, sorry, only 1/4 of hypertension in diabetic person is controlled. So this particular makes more risk of getting cardiovascular complications. So diabetes plus hypertension increases the cardiovascular risk almost 3 times than general population. So long-term survival of diabetes tends to have lower blood pressure. So lower the blood pressure in a diabetic will decrease the complications. So if you have got a rigid control of diabetes, rigid control of blood pressure, the complications will be reduced remarkably. So roughly if we say that because of increased insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome with hypertension is associated with diabetes, or metabolic syndrome is associated with obesity. So hypertension with obesity and diabetes. So when hypertension is associated with obesity, there is a 2-time increase in all this risk, that is coronary artery disease, CKD, arterial disease, cerebrovascular disease. So, and if hypertension is associated with diabetes in metabolic syndrome, then there is a 4-time increase. So this two becomes deadly combinations. So hypertension in diabetic plus obesity becomes a partner in crime, and they are a tremendous. So when hypertension, diabetes and obesity we call as a deadly trio. So duo becomes trio because of insulin resistance. So do remember. So in India, we have got 10% of people who are purely diabetic, 16% are diabetic with dyslipidemia, 18% are diabetic with hypertension. So this is deadly, this is also deadly, and when diabetes plus hypertension with dyslipidemia, three things are together, we call that as a deadly trio. So in India, we have got deadly duo, that is diabetic with hypertension and also diabetic with dyslipidemia is also, or we call obesity, is also deadly duo. While three things, diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia and obesity combined together, that will produce deadly trio. These three are deadly trio. These two are deadly for all the opposite parties, and these two are also deadly duo. These two are also considered as deadly duo, and these are deadly trio. Yes, diabetes and hypertension are definitely deadly duo. They can be considered as a two terrorists or sinister alliance, or we call them as a deadly duo. And if you add a third things, that is what we call as a dyslipidemia or obesity, hyperlipidemia, or we call obesity. So third person who is added over these two, it becomes deadly trio. Same way, now because of that, the cardiovascular disease is having a very high risk in presence of diabetes and hypertension. So whenever there is a diabetic with hypertension, the cardiovascular risk becomes much higher. So 65% of the death are due to cardiovascular disease. There is a twofold to fourfold time increase in coronary artery disease, that is ischemic heart disease death. The stroke risk also becomes 2 to 4 times higher, and heart failure becomes 2 to 5 times higher. So you can see that diabetic persons will die very frequently because of cardiovascular complications. So if you detect them early, you can prevent all this, or you can decrease the rate of cardiovascular death due to coronary artery disease, stroke, heart failures, etc. And that's why it is said in a big UKPD trial, a tight glycemic control reduces the complications. Even if you reduce HbA1c by 1%, you reduce its death related to diabetes by 21, microvascular complication like nephropathy and retinopathy by 37%, myocardial infarction by 14%, amputation and peripheral arterial disease complications by 43%, and stroke by 12%. You can see there is a marked reduction only in just reduction of only HbA1c by 1. So if you do a very rigid control, there will be a marked reduction in all these complications. So tighter the control, reduction will be much better. So you try to achieve a goal, and if you achieve that goal, you will reduce this much more than what these figures are. Now we just define what is diabetes, and then we go to the different terminology. So diabetes is a metabolic disorder which is of a multiple etiology, characterized by hyperglycemia with there's a disturbances of metabolism of all the three things: carbohydrate, fat, as well as protein metabolism. This is due to defect in insulin secretion, we call insulin deficient, or defect in insulin action, or combination of both, we call as insulin resistance, that we call as a diabetes mellitus. Where insulin secretion is lacking, or there is an insulin deprivation or insulin dependent, we call it as a type 1, while the insulin does not produce an action, or there is a combination of decreased insulin action plus there is a decreased insulin production together. This is because of insulin resistance, we call as a type 2. Now, the commonest symptoms by which we suspect a person is tiredness, increased hunger, we call as a polyphagia, repeated urinary tract infection and vaginal infections, decreased libido, tingling numbness, peripheral neuropathy, polydystia, person is very thirsty, sudden weight loss, wound healing is not proper, frequent urination we call polyuria, and because of retinopathy you can come across what we call the blurred vision. Retinopathy, peripheral neuropathy, and involvement of the kidney, we call that as microvascular complications, which will be commonly present by the time you detect a person to be in a type 2 diabetes mellitus. The common symptoms being polyphagia, polydystia, polyuria, 3P. We'll be adding something more also as we go by. Sudden weight loss is one of the very common symptoms in a person who is type 2 diabetes. Sometimes you get an opposite of that. Constant weight gain can be also one of the symptoms. So try to look at this. So this is a definition. If we want to put them into different groups, or we call classification, by and large we put into three common groups. We call as a type 1, that is insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, which we divide into further two, that is autoimmune, or we call type 1A, non-autoimmune or idiopathic, we call as a type 1B, where antibody may be negative. There is a second variety we call as a type 2, or we call non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, or we use a multiple name: maturity onset, adult onset, etc. Now only one word we use is a non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. Third group we put usually is type 3 diabetes mellitus, which is a monogenetic mutation, and that we call the maturity onset type of diabetes in youth, that is MODY. And in that MODY we have got lot of sub classification 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, MODY X, etc. There is another group we in that only we call as the insulin gene mutation, insulin receptor gene mutation, etc. These are all we call as a genetic etiology, that we call as a type 3. Now these are belonging to what we call as a primary group. So type 1 is also called insulin dependent or deficient or insulopenic diabetes mellitus, or also we use the word juvenile diabetes, brittle diabetes, labile diabetes, etc. But now at present standard word what we utilize is type 1 or insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, and we subdivide into two groups, type 1A and type 1B, while type 2 is called insulin independent diabetes mellitus, IDDM, or insulin resistant diabetes mellitus, and sometimes you use adult onset or maturity onset type of diabetes. And routinely we use these terms type 1, type 2. In type 2, GDM is added, that is gestational diabetes mellitus during pregnancy. LADA is usually termed as 1.5. MODY is usually put into type 3 group. And we have got another big group we call as a secondary diabetes mellitus. We'll be using in a next slide. So whenever it is secondary due to something, some etiology, then we call that as secondary. So in secondary it is due to pancreas. We usually come across in chronic pancreatitis or pancreectomy, or sometimes in a tropical diabetes we call as a chronic pancreatitis with nutritional disorders or toxic factors, etc. Or diabetes due to endocrinopathy, particularly Cushing's, glucocorticoids, iatrogenic Cushing, acromegaly, etc. This group. Also you can come across diabetes in myxedema, also in case of a thyrotoxicosis. In those group also you can come across hyperglycemia and you can have a secondary diabetes. You can come across diabetes secondary to immune suppression therapy or immune suppression. Diabetes can be associated with a genetic syndromes, Prader-Willi syndromes, DIMOD, etc. Or it can be because of some of the drugs, and one of the most common drug is glucocorticoids. And last group they put GDM in a separate groups. Some put them into separate group called type 4 diabetes mellitus, but usually this is now put into type 2 groups, that is insulin resistance group variety. So now they probably will come across a newer classification depending upon the insulin level, that is normal insulin level or a decreased insulin level or a total absent, we call it insulopenic. C-peptide level, which will give you an idea regarding the insulin is secreted or not. If the C-peptide level is 0, means there is insulin deficient diabetes mellitus. C-peptide level is very high, that is person is having insulin resistance, and in presence of antibodies present or absent, that is autoimmune or non-autoimmune, etc. So this will be utilized in a newer classification quite frequently. Now this is one of the proposed classification. It is showing you lot of good ways of classifying. So in type 1 and type 1.5 we call as a LADA. So this is totally insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. So this is called type 1, and type 1.5 LADA, that is characteristic by both type 1 and type 2 may be present together in this LADA. Then we use the word what we call as double diabetes. We'll be coming across one slide there. And when you come across type 2, this type 2 is usually associated with obesity, and it is very frequently because of a lifestyle modification. So type 2 is very frequently with obesity. Now this is usually divided into two big groups, severe and mild one. Severe is further divided into SIDD, that is severe insulin deficient diabetes in young adults. So you get a deficiency of insulin, means almost close to we call as a insulin deficient diabetes mellitus, and it is in a young individual, and they have got a very high risk of retinal damage, we call as retinopathy. And we have got another variety we call as a severe insulin resistant diabetes mellitus, which we the most common variety which we see in a type 2 we call as maturity onset type of diabetes, etc., which are more prone to develop diabetic nephropathy. So these are the two big groups. Here there is insulin production is there, but because of insulin resistance you get a severe diabetic, while here there is an insulin deficiency and they become a diabetic but they are obese. So this is one group, and this is very commonly seen in young adults. So these are the two major group in a severe variety. Invariably they need an insulin from outside. So that is one group. Second group we call is a mild variety, where it is called MARD, middle age related diabetes mellitus, which is usually benign. Second group in this, mild obesity related diabetes, which is again a benign, which usually does not end up with the complications. And third, which is added in a mild variety, is a gestational diabetes mellitus, which disappears usually after childbirth. So these three are usually a mild variety, which can be easily controlled by oral drugs. They usually do not require insulin. We come across another group we call as a type 3 diabetes. In that particular, neurons in the brain are unable to respond, and they are very frequently associated with Alzheimer's disease, we call as a type 3, or we also call as neuron are becoming insulin resistant, and because they are insulin resistant they develop brain damage, and very frequently they go into what we call as Alzheimer. So that is called type 3. There is one more type which they are now coming across. There is a new term that is very commonly seen in a lean elderly person, and it is caused by overactivity of certain types of cells, particularly immune system cells, and there is some type of a T cell abnormality which is going to lead to type 4 variety, and this particularly is seen in a rat, and this could become one of the variety in diabetes mellitus in near future. We call it a type 4. We come across one good variety which is a genetic variety, we call it a monogenetic, where because of mutation of one of the gene or change in the single gene, and you get 1 to 4% of all these cases of total diabetic mellitus, where we put one group we call as a MODI, that is maturity onset of diabetes in young individual, where there is definitely and clear-cut evidence of a genetic mutation, and there is another variety we call the neonatal diabetes of mellitus, which is little rare, which is usually seen before 6 months to 12 months of age, and it is due to mutation of a single gene. So these two are classical example of a monogenetic variety, while type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. In type 1 we have got an insulin deficient variety and LADA, and LADA can have overlapping of type 1. Type 1 is already present but overlapping with type 2. Now we label that particular group as even double diabetes. So we'll be explaining you that particular part. So this slide is very important to give you the exact idea, and it covers up all different varieties of diabetes, and this is probably what we call as a proposed classification, and in near future this may be one of the classification which you will have to utilize while giving a treatment to the person, and you will have to put them into type 1 or type 2. In type 2 severe, whether SIDS, SERDs, and if in type 2 mild variety, MUD, MOD, gestational, or type 3, type 4, or monogenetic varieties. So we will have to identify that particular group. This is type 1, which is autoimmune, which is seen in a young individual. Usually they've got a very low BMI. They are totally insulin deficient. HbA1c is very high at the time of a diagnosis, and invariably you will have presence of antibodies like GADA or even ICA or insulin autoantibodies. So that will be very, very common. This is put into type 1A. In type 1B, they are not non-autoimmune, where these antibodies are absent, and usually we put them into idiopathic groups. So that is called type 1B. And in LADA, you have got all the features nearly of type 1, plus slowly over a period of time they develop because of abnormal eating habits. They become insulin resistance. So basically they are insulin deficient. With that, they also develop overlapping insulin resistance. Then we call that as LADA, becoming what we call as a double diabetic. So in insulin body, you can get insulin autoantibodies, what we call as islet cells antibody. This GADA is one enzyme's antibody, and that is very classical in case of type 1 and LADA. In that, it will be positive. Type 2 diabetes, we already mentioned severe variety SIDS, where it is severe insulin deficient diabetes. It is usually in young adults, and there is a very high chance of retinal damage. In SERDs, severe insulin resistant diabetes, it is in young adults with nephropathy. While in a mild variety, we call mild age related diabetic, usually they are benign. While second group we call as a mild obesity related diabetic, again they are very commonly benign, and you can come across gestational diabetes. Monogenetic diabetic, we already called that as a MODY. In that, maturity onset of diabetes in young, strong family history, there will be gene mutation which will be detected. There are different 14 variants which are being now identified, and almost it accounts for 2 to 5% of all diabetic, and the age is always less than 30. While we call as neonatal diabetic, usually it is before 6 months, or we can say up to 1 year. It is not common, it is rare, it is a single gene mutation. But you do see this variety in a neonates. But by the child develops, may disappear. So in a monogenetic, classical, we have already given you a new description. You will come across also another variety we call as a latent variety. We call as a latent autoimmune diabetic in adult. Usually this will be seen after the age of 30, and in that there is an insulin deficient variety. There is a destruction of a pancreatic cells, plus there is a similar to type 2 diabetes mellitus, but autoantibodies are present as in type 1. So that particular group we call as a close to type 1 variety, but it occurs in adult. So that's why it is labeled as LADA. While monogenetic we call as a MODY, and it is an atypical presentation very frequently in a younger adults. And this is strong family history, we have already shown you here. There will be a strong family history, genetic mutation will be present, and it is before the age of 30. I already mentioned in a neonatal, they are usually seen before the age of 6 months. And there are two types of neonatal diabetes. There is one variety we call as a transient. It is for a very short period. By the age of 12 months, usually it disappears or it becomes permanent. It usually recurs later on in the life, in a teenager years or accounts for 50 to 60% of all cases. A permanent neonatal diabetes, as you might expect, lasts forever and accounts for 40 to 50% of all cases. So this is one variety which you should keep it in mind. And sometimes you do come across this. No doubt it is absolutely rare, but once in a while you can see in a neonates. I've already explained you double diabetes, that is a person who is a type 1, that is we call it LADA. Slowly over a period of time the person starts becoming obese because of a dietary habits and they start developing insulin resistance. So that we call as a type 1 now becoming type 2 overlapping. So that is double diabetes. So basically he is type 1 variety where he starts developing insulin resistance. Now we call this person is developing two types of diabetes, such as type 2 diabetes. Now there is third variety we call as type 3 diabetes, or we call diabetes of brain. And this is because the brain cells become resistant to insulin. So brain neurons are resistant to insulin and slowly over a period of time they starts developing a damage we call as Alzheimer's disease. So insulin resistance of brain cells will end up with what we call as a type 3 diabetes, and once a brain cells become resistant you will end up with the complications. While type 4 is because of it is in a lean elderly persons, there is an abnormal high level of immune cells. T regulatory cells are inside their fat cells and slowly over a period of time they develop insulin resistance, and this is almost like what we call as, however this type does not prevent type 2 insulin resistance, and that we label as type 4 diabetes mellitus. Now a person who develops type 2 diabetes has got certain risk factors like obesity, one of the major risk factors. The BMI more than 25 will become a risk factor for type 2. So higher the BMI, more the risk. Certain races are more prone to develop a type 2 diabetes mellitus. Female are also more prone to develop a type 2 diabetes mellitus. History of cerebrovascular disease, they are also more prone. Hypertension are also more prone to develop diabetes mellitus. Physical inactivity is another thing which will be predisposing to diabetes mellitus. Strong family history, polycystic ovarian syndromes in a female, and gestational diabetes, they are also one of the cause for predisposing to type 2 variety. So these are some of the risk factors. There are many other risk factors like obesity, genetic factors, stress, dietary habits, old individual, pregnancy, and sedentary lifestyles. These are some of the common. Genetic defects in insulin action, beta cell functions, insulin secretion, diseases of exocrine pancreas, endocrinopathy. These are all the factors which will be leading to secondary diabetes. Drugs or chemical induced infections, secondary due to severe infections, uncommon immune forms, genetic syndromes, acromegaly, Cushing syndrome, thyrotoxicosis, pheochromocytoma, chronic pancreatitis, malignancy, etc. Certain drugs, beta blocker, glucocorticoids, fluoroquinolones, thiazide diuretics, all this can also lead to secondary diabetes mellitus. Now before we go into what we call as a symptomatology, I would like to explain little bit regarding an insulin. Now insulin secretion will start as soon as you start taking food. Sometimes even with the thought of foods also, you start having a secretion of insulin. We have got the three spikes. One early morning, second at the lunch time. Early morning is we call breakfast. At a lunch time, and at the dinner time. This particular insulin secretion starts as soon as the sugar level starts rising. Sugar level start rising, insulin secretion starts from pancreas. It goes to cell, but cell cannot utilize insulin because insulin has to enter inside the cell. Insulin cannot enter directly through the cell wall. On the cell wall, there are what are we call as a keyhole, or we call receptor. Insulin is like a key. Once it attaches to the GLUT4 receptor, it is called GLUT4 receptor. Once that key enters into the keyhole, now glucose can enter inside into the cell. And once the glucose enter inside into the cell, mitochondria will metabolize glucose and produce energy and will produce what we call as the ATP molecules, which is required for cell function. And this is how the insulin will act. So for insulin action, it has to enter over the receptor. It has to get attached to the receptor. So it works like a key. And once the key is inside the keyhole, that is what we call as a receptor, then only the glucose can enter inside and can be utilized. In case of type 2 diabetes mellitus, these receptors are not working nicely. They are either destroyed or there are less number of receptors. We call insulin resistance. Hence, even the glucose is present, insulin is being produced, but still you cannot utilize glucose. And that is we call as a insulin resistance. While in case of type 1, insulin is not produced, receptors are present, but because of lack of insulin, glucose cannot enter inside into the cell because there is no key to open the entry of glucose into the cell. Once the insulin enters into the cell, it increases the glucose uptake by muscle and adipose tissue so that you get metabolism in muscle and adipose tissue. You get glycolysis, that is metabolism of glucose. You get glycogen synthesis in liver. So glucose from blood will be uptaken by liver and you will convert that into a storage we call as a glycogen. There will be a protein synthesis. There will be uptake of potassium and potassium will enter inside into the cell and potassium level will come down. This will be what we call as the effect on the cell. Simultaneously, it also acts on the liver and it stops gluconeogenesis. So the new formation of glucose by different cells and particularly by liver will be blocked. Breakdown of glycogen will be also reduced or will be blocked. Fat cells breakdown, that is lipolysis, will be also blocked. Ketogenesis is also blocked and proteolysis is also blocked. All these phenomena, that is gluconeogenesis, glycogenolysis, lipolysis, ketogenesis and proteolysis, as these are blocked, this will reduce the level of glucose and this will utilize glucose, and that is how the glucose level is reduced, and this is positive effect on the cell. So you get energy. Here it reduces the production of glucose. So by this two mixed action, it will have beneficial effect in a person. Simultaneously, insulin has got opposite action to glucagon. So glucagon level is reduced. So it will have an anti-glucagon effects. So that will give rise to a full action of insulin. What is happening in a type 1? It is basically a genetic etiology. So there is some gene which is responsible for this particular defects. You have got an environmental factor which is working. So probably there is some type of viral infections or there is some other type of beta cell damage. And when we can't identify this particular, we usually call that as idiopathic. Because of some viral infection, particularly like measles and mumps, there is an abnormal autoimmune response which is because of a genetic factor. So there is an immune response, again a normal beta cell. So we call autoimmune, and this immune response destroys the beta cells. And because of destruction of a beta cell, which is because of an autoimmune, we call type 1A. And when it is not because of an immune response, we call it a type 1B variety. So more frequently we get that type 1A variety, where you will be able to detect an antibody in blood, and this we call as a insulin dependent or insulin deficient or insulopenic diabetes mellitus. And this is what is happening, exact pathophysiology. There is a beta cell mal 100%. Person has got a genetic predisposition. There is some viral trigger. There is the initiation of an autoimmune response. There is a production of this autoantibody, islet cell antibody, GADA antibody, insulin autoimmune antibody, or islet cell antibody, autoantibody, etc. There are many different types of antibody. Commonly we look for ICA and GADA. So that starts producing insulinitis and beta cell injury. So you starts getting damage, and there is loss of beta cell mass, which is induced by, we call CD4 and CD8 cells. So you get destruction of those cells, and once there is a destruction of those cells, we start getting glucose intolerance, and the person develops pre-diabetic stage. And when there is a further cell damage, when 15 to 20% of beta cells are only functioning and rest are damaged, now person becomes a full-blown diabetic. But this is because of autoimmune in a very early age. We call that as a type 1 diabetes, or we use the word insulin dependent diabetes or insulinopenic diabetic mellitus. So there is an environmental factor, genetic factor, and autoimmune mechanism resulting into pre-diabetic stage and then becoming a full-blown diabetic. And this is in a very short period, very short period. While 90% of the people are type 2 diabetes, which are because of overweight or because of obesity. So the basic etiology is because of increased fat cells, and fat cells are resistant to insulin, and they develop over a period of time insulin resistance. Yes, there is also multiple gene defects. So there is some genetic defect which is being there. There is an environmental factors like obesity, pregnancy we call as a GDM, or person is taking certain drugs like steroid excess, etc. So there is an environmental factor, and all this factor, genetic factor, helps in disturbing the primary beta cell defects, and also this obesity and increased fat cells increases the peripheral tissue to have a insulin resistance. So slowly over a period of time there is an increased insulin production. Person develops hyperinsulinemia, and then over a period of time slowly now beta cells are being getting destroyed, the insulin production goes down, the fasting level becomes high, we call impaired fasting glucose. Then later on the postprandial also becomes high, we call IGT, and slowly a person starts getting beta cell exhaustion. By the time he is detected to have a type 2 diabetes, almost 50% of the beta cells are exhausted. And this is the mechanism what is happening in a person with type 2 diabetes mellitus. So type 2 diabetes mellitus has got a genetic predisposition, environmental factor, mainly what we call as a lifestyle modifications. So person has got an abnormal eating habits, and person starts developing obesity, and that produces insulin resistance, and because of a genetic factor there is a decreased beta cell functions, and then they go into what we call as a type 2 diabetes mellitus, and that is because of a beta cell dysfunctions. And insulin resistance also gives rise to many other things: genetic factors, glucotoxicity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, procoagulative stage, endothelial dysfunction, chronic low-grade inflammations, which will give rise to endothelial dysfunction, lipoatrophy, and this will be the factor which will be predisposing to drugs, age, adiposity, etc. will give rise to what we call as a metabolic syndrome, or we call as a insulin resistance, and we label them as a cardiometabolic syndrome, and they invariably produce cardiovascular complications, or we also call macrovascular complications. Now this is a famous picture which you should know what are the common factors which gives rise to hyperglycemia, and depending upon this factor we choose what we call as anti-diabetic drugs or treatment for diabetes. So this is called defronzo octet, or it is also called as the omnius octet. Now there are a lot of other factors which are being added which are also responsible for hyperglycemia. Now they call dirty dozen, then they've added furthermore they call sweet 16s. Now in near future we might have a 20, 30, 40, etc. So now I am going through one by one. The most important part is islet beta cell function becomes poor, and that starts producing insulin in a less quantity. So there is an impaired insulin secretions, and because of impaired insulin secretions you will have less utilization of glucose and person will start developing hyperglycemia. At the same time, alpha cells which are present in islet cells, they starts producing increased glucagon, which will increase the insulin production by anti-insulin effects, and that will also give rise to what we call as hyperglycemia. While liver will produce glycogenolysis and increase high glucose production and decrease glycogenesis, that will also be one of the factor. There are some neurotransmitter in brain which will be non-functioning or there will be dysfunction, that will increase your appetite, and that will also be responsible for hyperglycemia. Muscle uptake is also reduced because of peripheral resistance. Lipids, that is fat cells, will have increased lipolysis, and because of increased fat deposition you will have insulin resistance. And in stomach, we call as in GI tract, particularly small bowel, there are what we call the incretins. These incretins will have a decrease incretin effects, and that will be also one of the factors which will be responsible for hyperglycemia. And in kidney there is an increased reabsorption of glucose. So these are all the 8 different factors, that's why it is called octet, responsible for hyperglycemia. So we will have to target all this different mechanism which is producing hyperglycemia. Now there is no drug which has got effect on all these 8 factors plus other additional factors which will be coming in near futures. So we have got some drug which is acting on say liver, there are some drugs which are acting on the peripheral muscles and fat cells which reduces insulin resistance. There is some drug which is acting only on kidney. There are some which are acting at pancreas level. There are some which are acting at the incretin level, etc. So this is one diagram which is very useful. We'll be utilizing when we are going to talk about the treatment part. So this is called defronzo octet, or we call omnius octet. And in this particular diagram there are 2 additional factors which are being added. We call as a vascular insulin resistance, and there is something called as a inflammation. So these are the additional things which are being added. So in future you might have another some factors which will be added which will be responsible for hyperglycemia, and here we have mentioned the different drugs. This figure will be coming again when we do oral hypoglycemic agent, so I am skipping over this particular slide. Now you can see that how the exactly the progress is there in a type 2 diabetes. This is few years before the person is diagnosed as type 2. This is the time when he is diagnosed as type 2. So this is the time where the onset starts in type 2. But before that, what is happening? Person is starting development of the insulin resistance. And when he starts developing insulin resistance, what is happening you can just see. Now you can see here the insulin secretion initially is increased, and later on you can see that the insulin secretion is becoming less and less. So insulin production starts decreasing while insulin resistance goes on increasing, the insulin production is now decreasing. So this is one of the factor which is responsible for type 2. Now, this is 10 years before. So this is the stage where we call as a pre-diabetic. So person is obese, he is pre-diabetic. So try to detect the person at this particular level. Before the onset starts, that is a time where the person gets impaired fasting glucose. So if you are investigating in this period, you will be able to pick up this particular group we call as a pre-diabetic. Then later on they start developing what we call as the impaired fasting glucose, and then they start developing impaired glucose tolerance test. That is what we call as IGT will be abnormal, and then you can see that both are becoming higher and higher. And by the time you detect a person to be diabetic, here this will be the level where you detect the person to be diabetic, and then we label them as a cardiometabolic syndrome. By that time already the person has started developing a microvascular complications. Person then will start developing what we call as cardiovascular complications, and then he starts developing cardiovascular complications which sometimes they are irreversible and they succumb to death. So this is that particular. This is the stage where you should detect, or even before that, genetic susceptibility, environmental factor, increase energy intake, so increase diet, less expenditure, less utilization, obesity, insulin resistance. This is a pre-diabetic stage. As you don't diagnose, they go into a stage we call the metabolic syndrome, where they are pre-diabetic, and then you detect them. You call that as onset of diabetes. Already at that time there are microvascular complications. Then they start developing a macrovascular complications like atherosclerosis, hyperglycemia, hypertension, retinopathy, nephropathy, neuropathy, etc. And then they start developing severe macrovascular complications like blindness, renal failure, coronary artery disease. They can go for peripheral arterial disease and disabilities. So this is how they will progress. Once in a while they can develop even hypoglycemia, diabetic ketoacidosis secondary due to treatment part also, honk, hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma, and very rarely lactic acid acidosis because of cardiogenic complications, cardiogenic shock, or even because of a metformin. There are some chronic complications we call as a macrovascular and microvascular complication. In a macrovascular, cardiovascular and cerebrovascular. In micro, retinopathy, diabetic neuropathy, nephropathy, and what we call as the erectile dysfunctions. While acute complications which are secondary because of a metabolic disorders like diabetic ketoacidosis, honk, and hypoglycemia, which is because of too little insulin or because of too little intake. And sometimes they develop lactic acid acidosis because of hypotension and short stage, or because of what we call as metformin. So these are complications. In hypoglycemia, repeated hypoglycemia can produce lot of effects. This is a diagram which shows you abnormal neutrophil activation, platelet activation, factor 7 activation. This increases the coagulation, increase CRP, increase growth factors, increase interleukin 6, which produces inflammation and damage to endothelium. So endothelial dysfunction, there is a decreased vasodilatation, so again chances of a decreased blood flow. There is a hemodynamic changes because of sympathetic overactivity, tachycardia, cardiac arrhythmias, and because of adrenaline, increased adrenaline production, increased contractility, increased oxygen demand, heart workload is increased, but decreased oxygen supply and blood supply. Person can even develop acute MI. So this is an entire pathophysiology, what can happen during hypoglycemia. At your leisure time, you can go through that. Now I am talking about how exactly you approach to a person with type 2 diabetes. Means you will take a good history, you will have a good examinations, you will examine completely as a full individual, you will examine cardiovascular, respiratory, CNS, etc. alimentary system, all those system you will examine. And once you suspect a person to be diabetic, you will subject him to investigations. You will look for risk factors. You look for macrovascular, microvascular complications, and you look for a comorbid damage like ischemic heart disease, congestive heart failure, cerebrovascular, liver, kidney, peripheral arterial disease, retinopathy, etc. We look for all these things. This includes a complete thorough checkup of a person suspected to have a diabetic. So now, how you suspect a person to be diabetic? So it is from a history, then you go for physical examination and systemic examination. You'll go for investigation, you look for a risk factors, all risk factors. This is even very easy by taking a good history. You will look for macrovascular and microvascular complications, and that is what we call as a comorbid conditions. So we'll investigate for a comorbid conditions also, and then you will decide regarding a treatment part. So remember one thing, that diabetes, overall 75% of the patient with type 2 diabetes die from cardiovascular disease. So not diabetes itself produces complication, but because of diabetes you get a very high chance of development of hypertension and cardiovascular complications, and that is one of the factor which is responsible for a high mortality. Now 30 to 40% of the time, or 30 to 40% of the people are absolutely asymptomatic, or their symptoms are so minor so they are neglected or they are non-specific. So good number of times the person is directly detected in a stage where he comes to you with a complication like peripheral neuropathy, nephropathy, retinopathy, or ischemic heart disease like acute MI, or congestive heart failure, or cerebrovascular stroke, etc. And at that time you detect that person is a diabetic. Now there are some three common symptoms which are present, we call 3P. Polyuria, increased urine production and increased frequency. Polydipsia, increased thirst, increased intake of water. Polyphagia, increased appetite, and persons eats say that I got remarkably increase in the appetite. And good number of time either person has got a increased weight loss. So that is one of the very common symptoms in a person who is having a, we call as a insulin level are becoming less, and person is developing glucotoxicity because of increased hyperglycemia. Glucose is present but the cell cannot utilize. So that is called glucotoxicity. So in presence of glucotoxicity, you will have these three classical symptoms: polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia, and weight loss. And good number of time, because the person cannot produce energy, he will, because glucose cannot be utilized, ATP cannot be produced, so person will complain of lethargy, weakness, etc. And if all these symptoms are present, longer the duration, more suspicion, but the person will be giving you these complaints. So suspect those particular person from a good history. So these are called symptomatic person. So polyuria, polydipsia, weight loss, fatigue, weakness, multiple, what we call as a frequent superficial infection, that is skin infection, fungal infection, urinary tract infections. Person can present to you is a blurred vision, and or directly they come to you with a complications like neuropathy, nephropathy, retinopathy, or ischemic heart disease, etc. So do look for all these symptoms. These are all the common symptoms we have already shown you. Polydipsia, fatigue, person is absolutely asymptomatic here. Polyuria, excessive urination. Weight loss, opposite of that, person also says that I am gaining weight. Obesity, excessive hunger. These are some of the common symptoms, so do pay attention. There are two additional, I'll add. These are 3P: polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia, pruritus, and paresthesia. So these two can be also additional features which can tell you that sometimes the person has got possibility of diabetes mellitus. So do look for that. You can say 5P. You can add this 2P in this standard 3, polydystia, polyphagia, polyuria. So polyuria, polydystia, polyphagia plus weight loss, fatigue, frequent urination, rapid onset, insulin deficient, and early onset. So polyuria, polyphagia, polydystia, weight loss, fatigue, diabetic ketoacidosis, rapid or early onset, straightforward tells you that it is type 1. Now this is one very important slide which, if in a good history, rarely you require investigation. Type 1 is very common in younger age group. We say that less than 25, 30. Type 2 is usually in a mature or we call adult onset type of diabetes. Here it is very rapid, rapidly and intensity of the onset, that is sudden and severe. So it develops very early and it is usually severe. So blood sugar is very high, more prone to ketoacidosis. Where this is usually slow and gradual. Body weight usually underweight, thin build individual. Only in case of what we call as a double diabetic, person might start gaining weight. While in a person with type 2, by and large he is overweight or obese. Very rarely person will say that I have lost 5 to 10% of body weight in a short period. Very, very rare, not very common. There is a very strong family history, more common in type 2, while in type 1 you get less than 20%, giving you a strong family history, that parents and sibling with the same disease. Autoimmune antibodies will be strongly present in type 1. They are never present in type 2. Islet cell pathology, there is a minimal inflammation and fibrosis in type 1, while in case of type 2 you might see amyloid deposits. Beta cells are markedly diminished in type 2, while beta cells are present but the production of insulin has decreased. Blood insulin level is markedly low, and because of that, if you do the insulin level in blood and C-peptide level, both are markedly diminished. While in case of type 2, invariably insulin level is normal or maybe slightly decreased, or sometime in an initial stage we call insulin production is increased, we call hyperinsulinemia, and in a late stage the insulin production is decreased, and C-peptide level are elevated because of increased production during that particular time. But C-peptide level are present, while here sometimes C-peptide level are close to 0. Ketoacidosis are very common in case of type 1. It is absolutely rare in type 2 unless a person has skipped insulin or has skipped the medicines or is taking a very high glucose diet. Then only they go into ketoacidosis. As far as the clinical approach is concerned, they require diet and insulin. So insulin is the main therapy. Usually oral hypoglycemic agent will not work in type 1, while in case of a type 2 you can have a diet modification, oral hypoglycemic agent and insulin in some of the person who are severely insulin deficient. And what we call is a glucagon. Usually type 1 our glucagon level are high and they are suppressible, while in case of type 2 glucagon level is high but they are resistant to the effect of glucagon. So type 1, and this is the difference between type 1 and type 2, and these are the antibodies which will be present in type 1. We call islet cell autoantibody, GADA. This will be present in type 1 and LADA. So this is a minor difference which you can remember in type 1 double diabetes and type 2. So this is pure type 2, this is pure type 1, this is mixture of the two. So this is at a very early age, this is at a late age, and this is type 1 becoming insulin resistance becomes double diabetic, or we call there will be adult LADA. So Genetic factors are present here. Genetic factors are also present here. In double diabetic, depends. But by and large, the type 1 are becoming, so those factors may be present. Environmental factors are usually in double diabetic is lifestyle, that is diet, excess diet intake, high calorie diet, and sedentary lifestyle. Same thing is responsible for type 2. While here, virus, cow milks, diet, etc. are partly responsible. In type 1, antibodies are strongly positive. In double diabetic, may be present, may not be present, but in type 2 it is always absent. Type 1 is also T cell mediated, while in double diabetic, T cell abnormality may be present. C peptide level are present in type 2 more strongly, while usually C peptide levels are close to 0. While in double diabetic, because they start developing insulin resistance, the C peptide may be present in a small quantity. Insulin resistance is very high in case of type 2, while in case of double diabetic, insulin resistance is present, but in type 1, usually insulin resistance is 0. So inflammatory markers will be strongly positive in case of type 2, while they are less in case of type 1. Macrovascular complications are more common in type 2, less common in type 1. And when you compare with LADA, we have already told you, LADA is late onset or latent autoimmune diabetes in adult. So it is having almost all this feature, but little late in onset. That is the main difference. So try to remember that particular things. Now, in an type 2 diabetes mellitus, one of the very important clinical finding we call acanthosis nigricans. So in presence of acanthosis, this pigmentation in axilla, over the neck, and presence of skin tags will show you, and this pigmentation on knuckles. If these are present, these are already what we call as insulin resistance. You can see this skin tags. So if you see that skin tags, this pigmentations, neck, back of the neck, in axilla, do suspect insulin resistance, and they are very much prone to develop type 2 diabetes mellitus. This is what we say, that type 1 slowly becoming type 2. So there is an overlapping of type 2, and when there is an overlapping of type 2, so this is the overlapping of type 2, this is a full blown type 1, and in that you get a little overlapping features of type 2, that is insulin resistance. Person is becoming obese, so we call that as a double diabetes. Now there is one common group we call as a metabolic syndrome, where it consists of all these things: hypertension, dyslipidemia, obesity, and impaired glucose tolerance, or we call as a pre-diabetic. When all these four things are present and presence of microalbuminuria, we call that as a metabolic syndrome. And this is now becoming a very common in India, and we are probably the what we call as number one in entire world. We are becoming number one. As far as the major diabetic complications are concerned, we already told you microangiopathy and macroangiopathy. Micro is nephro, retino, and peripheral arterial disease. Also, peripheral neuropathy. These are the three common we call as a microangiopathy, while macro is cardiovascular system, cerebrovascular disease, and severe peripheral arterial disease. Diabetic neuropathy can be central encephalopathy, peripheral, or visceral, or even we call as autonomic neuropathy. One of the another common presentation is hypoglycemia. Very rarely a person first time present as an hypoglycemia, probably because of decreased intake of food or because of decreased glucose level in the blood. This particular person will present as a headache, sweating, impaired vision, dizziness, tachycardia, cold clammy extremities, shaking, anxiety, irritability, weakness, fatigue, hunger. All these symptoms may be present. So hypoglycemia can be present even in absence of a treatment, but very frequently it is a common symptom because of skipping of meals or because of excess of drug, excess of insulin, etc. Very rarely type 2 presents as diabetic ketoacidosis. It is more common with what we call as type 1. But in type 2, because of excess of high sugar diet, skipping insulin, skipping medications can end up with diabetic ketoacidosis. A person with diabetic ketoacidosis very frequently will present with vomiting, acute pain in abdomen, rapid breathing, tachypnea, tachycardia, feeling sleepy, dry mouth, flushed face, and fruity smell. All this may be present. And once you suspect, you investigate. These are all the complications we already mentioned: retinopathy, neuropathy, nephropathy, ischemic heart disease, peripheral vascular disease, cerebrovascular disease, and other complications during pregnancy. These are rare complications we call Charcot joint. You can get involvement of the joint involvement. There may be debutine contracture, and this is called Preyer's sign, diabetic ulcers, skin changes, dermatosis. Even person has got a high chance of developing cataracts, etc. So these are all the things by which you should suspect. And now once you suspect, now we will undergo investigation. So there are some common investigation which we do. We call GTT, or you can do fasting, postprandial, HbA1c. So by doing this, you try to identify person is diabetic, pre-diabetic, or non-diabetic. Lipids level are done to identify abnormal hyperlipidemia. Serum creatinine is done usually to find out the renal function and any involvement of the kidney because of diabetes or because of any other conditions. And because while selecting a drug, you will have to keep in mind the kidney functions. ECG echo is mainly to identify the cardiovascular complications. We call coronary artery disease because of diabetes. Fundus examination is to rule out retinopathy. And you do look for peripheral neuropathy to find out what we call as a neurological dysfunctions and microvascular complications. There are certain risk factors which you can obtain from a history and examination, that is obesity, smoking, alcohol, stress, sedentary lifestyle, and dietary habits. One more test which is very helpful in identifying secondary causes, that is thyroid function test. In thyrotoxicosis, already there is hyperglycemia, and good number of time hypothyroidism is also associated with hyperglycemia. So do a test to rule out hypothyroidism, and in case of hypothyroidism, always rule out diabetes mellitus, or we call hyperglycemia. Try to look for that. And for macrovascular and microvascular complication, do investigate to rule out cardiovascular, cerebrovascular, retinopathy, peripheral arterial disease, neuropathy, etc. Try to rule out all those. So preliminary investigation is GTT or oral glucose tolerance test. These are the two words utilized. Either you give 75 gram of glucose or 100 gram of glucose. Nowadays only 75 gram is being done. So you do blood sugar fasting, and if it is with GTT, half an hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hour, 2 hour, 2.5, and 3 hour. So all those should be done. This will help you identify one odd variety we call as the elementary hyperglycemia. So you can identify that particular thing. Why? When you do a fasting, postprandial or post glucose or random along with HbA1c, it will help you to put them into normal, IFG, IGT, pre-diabetic, diabetic. And in a suspected patient with type 1, and you want to differentiate type 1 LADA from other groups, or double diabetic from other groups, insulin level, C-peptide level and antibodies level. These are done mainly to differentiate type 1 LADA or what we call as double diabetic from other groups, because these levels, that is insulin level, will be very low, C-peptide level will be close to 0 in type 1 and antibody will be present in type 1. Antibody will be also present in LADA. It will be also present in case of double diabetic also. So try to rule out that. Urine analysis is mainly done for microalbuminuria and also done for ketoacidosis. But urine sugar should not be considered for treatment of diabetes, because urine sugar will depend on many factors. One, we call renal threshold. So if renal threshold is very low, urine sugar will be strongly present. But if renal threshold is high, even with a high blood sugar, urine sugar may be normal or may be negative. So do keep this thing in mind. And urine sugar level may be false positive because of presence of other sugar rather than glucose. And sometimes urine sugar level may be elevated if a person is on SGLT-R inhibitors. So that should be kept in mind. So do not rely on a urine sugar for diagnosing, prognosis and for treatment part of diabetes mellitus. Lipid profile is mainly done to find out one of the risk factor for cerebrovascular and cardiovascular disorders. So try to rule out that. So lipid levels are done for that particular purpose. In a diabetic, uncontrolled diabetic, TG level are usually very high. So TG will be high, TC will be high and LDL will be high. So try to identify that particular, we call dyslipidemia, diabetic dyslipidemia. And these are the different organs which can be affected: eye, retina, peripheral neuropathy, for cardiovascular ECG and echo, and for peripheral arterial disease Doppler, and in a renal, kidney involvement, blood urea, creatinine should be done. For retina, fundoscopic examination, and for peripheral neuropathy, simple peripheral nerve conduction examination should be done by monofilament or by what we call as a tuning fork test. Now, in a suspected person with polyphagia, polydystia, polyuria and weight loss, do fasting equal to or more than 126, postprandial equal to or more than 200, or post glucose after 75 gram of glucose at 2 hours more than 200 or equal to 200, and HbA1c equal to or more than 6.5 is usually labeled as diabetes. Now this is that particular. So fasting more than 126 is diabetic, 2 hours more than 200 is diabetic, random more than 200 and HbA1c more than 6.5. But if fasting less than 100, postprandial less than 140, random less than 140 and HbA1c less than 5.7 is normal. While pre-diabetic between this and this, that is fasting between 100 and 125, we call IFG. If 2 hour sample, that is after glucose or after postprandial, between 140 to 199 is IGT. If random sugar is not considered, any figure is not considered for pre-diabetic, while HbA1c between 5.7 to 6.4 is pre-diabetic. So these are the three groups which you should say by these figures. So you should label a person is diabetic if these are the figures: fasting, postprandial and HbA1c. Random is usually not utilized for labeling a person as diabetic. So same thing here. You can go through at leisure time. Clear? Now, in type 1, they are further divided into stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. We don't go into detail. At your leisure time, you can go What are the different stages? Autoimmune, normoglycemic, pre-symptomatic. In stage 2, autoimmunity is present. Now glucose starts becoming abnormal, is still asymptomatic. While in stage 3, new onset of hyperglycemia and now person is symptomatic. So usually the person is detected in this stage. So try to find out them in an early stage like this. So these are the genetic abnormality. HLA, DR3 and DR4 are positive. And try to identify by all these criteria. And insulin antibody will be present during all these stages. During all these stages. GADA is glutamic acid decarboxylase antibody, and IAA is insulin autoantibody, or we call it islet cell autoantibody, and that is in islet cells antibody is ICA. Usually common these two words are utilized, GADA and ICA. Those two are commonly. I have already discussed regarding a LADA. LADA is called 1.5, means there are all the classical features of type 1, but it occurs little late in onset, and that's why it is called type 1.5. So major features are of type 1, and slowly now do not mistake it for type 2. So only age of onset is little late in adult. But this particular group of people, because of a dietary habit, over a period of time starts developing obesity and insulin resistance, then we call that particular person is having double diabetes. So do remember this. So LADA is usually after the age of 25, and they are usually non-obese. Usually they are non-obese, but later on they become obese, and in that LADA you have got low fasting, post-glucagon stimulated C-peptide levels. So C-peptide levels are markedly diminished. HLA positive, ICA is positive, and GADA is also positive. And that is how we find out. In GDM, GDM can be diagnosed by, first, pre-gestational diabetes should be absent, and person should develop a diabetes after 24 weeks of pregnancy, and usually it does not last longer. After delivery, by and large the person becomes normal, but they are forerunner of type 2 diabetes. And during that particular period, person will have a HbA1c more than 6.5 but less than 7.5. And there are some criteria which tells you that person is having GDM, and that is after 50 gram of glucose, 1 hour test more than 140, after 75 gram of glucose or 100 gram of glucose, that is after 3 hours of oral glucose tolerance test. What are the value? If any time fasting is done more than 95, if after 50 gram of glucose, after 1 hour 180, or after 2 hours 155, or after 3 hours more than 140. So remember 95, after 1 hour 80, after 2 hour 155, and after 3 hour 140 should be considered in favor of GDM and should be treated as GDM. Modi, already I have told you that it is maturity onset type of diabetes, means it is like an adult onset type of diabetes in a young individual. Good number of times this is mistaken as type 1, but there are some peculiarities. This occurs early in life, that is in childhood or adult or young adults we call. It is affecting only 1 to 2% of total diabetic. There are three main features of Modi, that is it occurs before the age of 25, while LADA occurs after the age of 25. There is a strong family history and there is a genetic mutation. So if you do a genetic study, it will be strongly positive, and this can be easily treated by a dietary modification. What we call as a person has to have a rigid control in diet, or we call lifestyle modification, and can be treated on a oral hypoglycemic agents. We'll be talking about that. So that is in a maturity onset type of diabetes. and does not always need insulin because they are not insulin deficient diabetes. They are little amount of insulin resistance is present, but they are not insulin deficient. Hence, they do not require insulin. They occur at early age, but they are not insulin deficient. So do remember, when you give that metformin or you give sulfonylurea, person will respond to treatment. As far as urine analysis is concerned, only ketone bodies is very helpful and for microalbuminuria. So in a urine analysis, those two are useful. So ketone to rule out acidosis, ketoacidosis, and albuminuria, microalbuminuria to find out damage to kidney, that is nephropathy. So these two can be utilized. You can do by a chemical analysis or by a dipstick. So dipsticks are available for both, or you can do a chemical analysis for both. This is Rothera's test. You can go for Rothera's test or you can go for a dipstick test. We call ketodiastic. So these are available in markets. Now HbA1c. HbA1c gives you an idea for approximately 4 months. 50% of the HbA1c is because of this past 1 month, 25% by second month, third month gives you only 15% contribution, and fourth month contribution is only 10%. By and large, they say that about approximately 3 months. So it gives you an average glucose over 90 days. So over 90 days. So this particular is very, very helpful. There are little drawbacks. It will be abnormal even in absence of normal glucose, in anemia, in hemoglobinopathies, etc. We are not going into that detail. But by and large, 50% is contributed by last 30 days. So if it is grossly abnormal, you can say that you had an abnormal diabetic control at least in last month, and rest of the 50% is previous 2 months. So that particular should be kept in mind. So try to remember this. Now if I show you this slide, this is very, very important. Higher the HbA1c, major contribution of HbA1c is by fasting glucose, and lower the HbA1c, say HbA1c is close to 7, it is mainly by postprandial. So in lower HbA1c, you have to control postprandial much better, and in a higher HbA1c, control fasting is much better. So more you control fasting, it will lower very fast from higher to this level, and in lower level, fasting contribution is less. What you have to control is postprandial. So postprandial control has to be there in lower HbA1c, and fasting should be rigidly controlled if a HbA1c is very, very high. So remember this. So fasting contributes more for higher HbA1c, and postprandial contributes in a lower HbA1c. Major contribution is by postprandial in lower, and fasting major contribution. There is another test called as a serum fructosamine test. Usually this is not done, and this can be, even this is available as a diazyme. So this should be done, but this is not commonly utilized. But this gives you a change in 7 days. But near future, this may become a very important test. Then there is another test which we call, that is insulin assay and C-peptide level. So this can be also done to rule out type 1, LADA and double diabetic from other varieties, to differentiate those particular group. So in that particular type 1 and LADA, you should subject them to confirm the diagnosis of type 1, this particular groups, by doing insulin level and C-peptide level, and antibody level is done separately. Lipid profile, I have already told you, in diabetic there will be abnormal lipids, or we call dyslipidemia. So try to investigate that. These are all the people who are prone to pre-diabetic, or we call as an asymptomatic person, may become pre-diabetic and then later on become type 2 diabetes. So go through this at the leisure time. I'm running very fast. If HbA1c is more than 5.7, is pre-diabetic. If he's having IGT or IFG, first degree relative of a diabetic person, there is a high risk in certain race or ethnicity, particularly African American, Native American, Asian American, Pacific, and we are also more prone to be diabetic. That is, we call Asian. Women's diagnosed as GDM, then history of cerebrovascular disease, hypertensive person, hyperlipidemic person, polycystic ovarian syndrome, person with physical inactivity, and insulin resistance, that is obesity and acanthosis nigricans. Also, if any person who has got BMI more than 23, waist circumference in a male more than 90 and in woman more than 80 should be investigated thoroughly. Also, any person who is having all the risk factors which are going to produce what we call as chances of pre-diabetic, they must be investigated, and these are all those risk factors. All those risk factors. Do keep in mind all these risk factors and try to investigate those persons. And don't forget mixed edema. And one another clue, delivery of a baby, if any female who delivers a baby more than 4 kg or more than 9 lb should be investigated. After all this knowledge, now you should put the person into different group, whether it's pre-diabetic or whether it is type 1 or whether it is type 2, is GDM, or it is due to endocrininopathy, or it is Moody or LADA, or it is double diabetic, etc. And very, very rarely secondary groups, that is pancreatic diabetic. Now this particular person, once you diagnose, once you start treatment, what we call is a regular follow-up checkup. A regular follow-up checkup, HbA1c is usually done every 3 months, or we say 2 times to 4 times in a year. Blood pressure should be examined at all the times, should be regularly checked up. Lipid level at least once in a year. Eye examination once in a year. Foot examination once in a year. Dental examination once in a year. Urine examination also once in a year, and we call urine albumin creatinine ratio should be also done. Flu shot should be given to all diabetic person. Pneumococcal vaccine should be given in a person with a diabetic and age more than 65 should be given. Now, even if the investigation is done recently and if the person has got any suspicion of any one of this abnormality, should be repeated. Don't take it for granted. It should be done only once in a year. So these are all the things which are given separately. Regular checkup for blood pressure, weight records, look out for BMI, look for peripheral neuropathy, HbA1c, triglyceride, lipids, LDL, HDL, microalbuminuria, and retinopathy. Checkup should be done at a regular interval. Now, for a blood sugar, self-monitoring is a must. And in a self-monitoring, there are a lot of different types of instruments which are available. You should use the best and accurate instrument. And it is usually we call one-touch instruments, which gives you a rapid and more accurate reading. And it should be regularly counter-checked. There is something called as self-monitoring blood glucose by use of these instruments. These are all the different types of instruments which are available, including even a watch. So monitoring should be done regularly. Ideally, fasting postprandial should be done, and at a regular interval, HbA1c should be done. In a self-monitoring, fasting, postprandial, pre-lunch, post-lunch, pre-dinner, post-dinner, and midnight. Like this, ideally this should be 7 sample checking should be done at regular interval. Extremely difficult, no one will do it. So it is almost now replaced by, there is another material which is available. We call continuous glucose monitoring system, CGMS system, continuous glucose monitoring. So a patch is put on a forearm and you do a continuous glucose monitoring. Also it is called ambulatory glucose profile. So try to do this. Little costly but gives you a lot of other additional information. So continuous glucose monitoring gives you alarm for low blood glucose. It will also give an alarm for high blood glucose to prevent ketoacidosis and hypoglycemia. So this will help to prevent hypoglycemia. This will help to prevent ketoacidosis. It will help to minimize the glucose fluctuation. We call variation, glucose variation, behavior modification, and it will also help to prevent complications. And these are the different types of, we call CGMS devices which are there. This can record for a longer period. These are all the different type of CGMS devices, and these devices will give you an idea, and that will also help to have insulin pumps. So these are all the devices which are being there, CGMS devices. Now there are also some devices which are there. This you can utilize in a children. There are prickless blood glucose testing devices. There are iPhones which are available. There are wireless blood glucose monitoring devices like this. But this may sometimes gives you a wrong reports. Or they are also called as the infrared blood glucose readers. So they can be utilized for monitoring. So I end my lecture here. I hope this will be helpful. In a subsequent lecture, we'll be talking about what we call as a oral hypoglycemic agents. So till that, go through this. We'll be talking in a second lecture regarding